Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the show that pulls the key insights from, well, a whole stack of sources, just for you.
And today, we're diving into something absolutely fundamental, something that shapes almost every interaction we have: morality.
Yeah, morality. So to kick things off, let's just throw a few scenarios out there. Imagine a family, right? Their pet dog dies. They're heartbroken.
Okay.
But instead of burying it, they decide to cook and eat it. They see it as maybe honoring its life, not letting it go to waste.
Okay. Provocative.
Or picture this.
Uh.
A woman, she's got an old, worn-out national flag. She cuts it up to use as cleaning rags.
Right.
And then there's this actual case from Germany. A man puts an ad online looking for someone willing to be eaten.
Yeah.
And he finds someone.
He actually found someone.
Yeah, a computer engineer, totally serious, who consented. It actually happened.
Wow. Okay. Those are, pretty jarring scenarios.
They really are. So for you listening, think about it. Are any of these actions right or wrong? And maybe the bigger question is why? Why do you feel the way you do?
And that why is exactly what this deep dive is about. We're going to be blending morality with psychology, leaning really heavily on the work of psychologist Jonathan Haidt.
His work is fascinating. We're trying to uncover how our moral sense is actually wired, how it really operates. And spoiler alert, it's often in ways you might not expect.
Absolutely. What's so sort of revolutionary about Haidt's perspective is how much it challenges our self-image. He basically argues we're far less rational than we like to think, especially when making moral calls.
Right. It's not all logic up here.
Not at all. He says our judgments really spring from these deep-seated emotional structures. And because these structures, well, they differ. They differ between people, between cultures.
Ah, so that's why we disagree so much.
That's a huge part of it. It explains why we often get locked into these disagreements, constantly trying to persuade each other and often just failing. We're talking past each other.
Haidt has this great metaphor for it, doesn't he? Like our moral sense is a tongue.
Exactly. Like a tongue with 6 distinct taste buds. Think about food. Sweet, sour, salty, bitter, umami, maybe spicy too. Different combinations create all these unique flavor preferences.
Right, totally. Like cilantro, love it or hate it.
Precisely. And Haidt says morality works the same way. These 6 moral test buds combine differently for each of us, creating our unique moral palates. It's why we clash. We're literally tasting morality differently.
It reminds me of his other big idea, the elephant and the rider.
Yes. It's the same core theory. Our emotions, our intuition, that's the giant, powerful elephant, our rational thinking. That's the tiny rider on top.
And the rider thinks he's in charge.
But mostly, he's just steering an elephant that's already decided where it wants to go. The rider can maybe warn the elephant or try to rationalize its path, but it doesn't truly dictate the direction. Emotion is primary.
Okay, so today we're digging into 3 main principles from Haidt. What are they?
Right. So first, we judge emotionally, then we rationalize. Gut first, logic second.
Okay. Counterintuitive for some, maybe.
Definitely. Second, there are these 6 distinct dimensions, the taste buds to our moral emotions. We'll break those down.
Got it.
And third, morality has this incredible power. It binds us together into groups, but it can also, it can blind us.
Blind and blind. Okay, interesting. Let's get into that first principle then, the idea that emotion comes first. Because like you said, that really flips the script for people who pride themselves on being logical.
It really does. The big idea here is your moral judgments. They pop up emotionally almost instantly. Your reasoning mind then scrambles to build a case for why that gut feeling is right.
So my logic is like my intuition's lawyer.
That's a great way to put it. It's constructing a post hoc justification. It makes it look like a rational decision, but the feeling came first.
People have debated morality forever, right? Where does it come from?
Oh, for centuries. Is it innate, hardwired? Do we learn it from our parents, our society? Or is it something we figure out ourselves through reasoning?
That last one, the reasoning part, that's kind of the default view in a lot of Western thought, isn't it? Moral rationalism.
Exactly. Moral rationalism. The idea that morality is mainly about figuring out how to prevent harm and ensure fairness. Don't steal because it harms the owner. Don't cheat because it's unfair. That's the standard take summarized by researchers like Elliot Turiel.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But Haidt looked at that and said, hang on a minute.
Right. He noticed that loads of things considered immoral, especially if you look outside modern Western cultures or even in historical texts like the Hebrew Bible. They don't seem to be about harm or fairness at all.
Like the example you gave earlier, touching swarming insects.
Precisely. Or rules about food purity or sexual taboos. There's often no clear victim, no obvious harm or unfairness in the way we usually think about it, but they are deeply felt moral violations for those cultures.
So what happens when people feel something's wrong, but they can't point to the harm or unfairness?
This is where it gets really interesting. Haidt found that people often invent a reason. They feel the wrongness first, this strong gut feeling. Then, if pushed to explain, and they can't find a logical harm-fairness reason,
They just make one up.
they confabulate. Like in the dog-eating scenario, people who felt it was wrong but couldn't say why would sometimes say things like, well, maybe they'd get sick from eating dog meat, even if told the meat was perfectly safe.
Wow. So the emotion is desperately searching for a rational hook to hang itself on.
Exactly. It shows the emotion leading and reason scrambling to follow. Philosophers have touched on this, Plato thought reason should rule, but David Hume argued reason is really the slave of the passions. Jefferson thought they sort of co-governed. Haidt leans much more towards Hume.
And there's brain science to back this up too, right?
There is. There's evidence from patients with damage to a specific brain area, the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the VMPFC.
Okay, what happens to them?
They lose their gut feelings, their emotional responses. They can look at horrific images or joyful ones and feel nothing. Intellectually, they know it's bad or good, but the feeling isn't there.
Does it affect their thinking?
Here's the kicker. Their IQs are fine, their logical reasoning is intact. They can even score highly on theoretical moral reasoning tests. But in real life, their decision-making collapses.
How so?
They make terrible social judgments, ruin relationships, lose jobs. Without the emotional tags telling them this feels good or this feels bad, they get lost in endless, pointless calculation.
Like trying to pick ice cream with no preference.
Exactly that analogy. Imagine logically weighing the calories, the price per scoop, the nutritional value, without any feeling of, ooh, chocolate sounds good. The decision becomes incredibly hard, maybe impossible. It shows how vital emotion is for navigating life, especially moral life.
You don't logically deduce that harming your family is bad. You feel it's wrong.
You feel it instantly and powerfully, and experiments like the ones using the trolley problem bear this out too.
Ah, yeah, the classic dilemma. Save 5 by sacrificing 1.
Right. When people grapple with these tough moral choices in brain spanners, the emotional centers of the brain light up like crazy.
The feeling is driving the bus.
It seems so. The emotional areas are highly active during the judgment itself. Then other areas associated with reasoning kick in afterwards, probably to construct that narrative, that justification for the feeling.
It's wild, too, how physical things can influence our moral judgments, like washing your hands.
Yeah, that University of Toronto study is amazing. People who literally just washed their hands with soap gave harsher judgments on morally impure actions, things like watching porn or taking drugs.
Just from washing their hands.
Just from washing their hands. And the reverse was true, too. When people were asked to recall their own past moral failings or even just copy out a story about someone else's mistake, they showed a stronger preference for cleaning products like antiseptic wipes afterwards.
Wow. So there's this deep, maybe unconscious link between physical cleanliness and moral purity.
It seems deeply embedded. It suggests these moral feelings, especially around purity and disgust, are tied into very basic, almost primal systems.
Okay, so the big takeaway from this first part. Our gut leads, our reason follows. Intuition is the dog, reason is its tail, wagging to look good.
That's the core idea. Emotion first, reason second, when it comes to morality.
All right, let's circle back to those opening scenarios then. Eating the dog, the flag, the cannibalism. You mentioned Haidt found a group that reacted differently.
He did. He found that while most people had a strong negative moral reaction, a specific subset, often university students from Western backgrounds, felt these actions were maybe disgusting or weird, but not necessarily morally wrong.
They thought it was the person's right to choose, even if they personally wouldn't do it.
Exactly. They respected individual autonomy as long as no one else was directly harmed. And this observation led Haidt to a really important point about who we study in psychology.
You mean the weird problem?
Yes, the weird problem. Weird stands for Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic.
And the issue is that most psychology research has been done on these populations.
Overwhelmingly so. Haidt argues this has given us a skewed view of human nature, especially morality. The kind of moral rationalism we talked about, focusing just on harm and fairness, seems to be much more characteristic of weird societies.
So other cultures have a broader sense of what counts as moral.
Definitely. In more individualistic societies, like many weird ones, morality often gets narrowed down to, does it harm someone? Or is it unfair? Other rules about things like respect or purity or loyalty might be seen as mere social conventions or personal preferences, not deep moral issues.
But in collectivist societies,
The moral domain is often much wider. Things that weird people might see as just etiquette or tradition can be deeply moral issues tied to group harmony, respect for roles, or spiritual purity.
so Haidt tried to broaden the picture beyond just harm and fairness.
He did. He looked across cultures and history and identified broadly three major ethical systems that influence people everywhere, though perhaps in different mixes.
What are they?
Well, there's what he calls freedom ethics. This is very prominent in the West. It values individual liberty and autonomy, the right to live your life as you choose, as long as you don't harm others or violate basic fairness.
Okay, that sounds familiar.
Then there's community ethics. This is more common in collectivist cultures. It emphasizes duties, roles, group well-being, social harmony, respect for tradition, and hierarchy. The group comes first.
Makes sense.
And the third.
Divinity ethics. This is rooted in the idea that humans are part of a larger, often sacred order. It's concerned with things like purity, sanctity, avoiding degradation or pollution, living in a way that honors God or the cosmos.
And Haidt's point is that most cultures, and even individuals within weird cultures, are actually influenced by a mix of all three, not just the freedom one.
Exactly. We might prioritize one over the others, but they're all part of the human moral repertoire. This led him to identify the specific taste buds, the fundamental moral foundations.
The 6 foundations. Okay, let's break them down. What's the first one?
The first pair is care-harm. This is the most obvious one, probably. It's rooted in our mammalian evolution, the need to protect vulnerable offspring.
Like why we find babies and puppies cute. Exactly. That cuteness triggers our care response. Evolution favored individuals who were sensitive to suffering and acted to protect their young and kin. This foundation makes us sensitive to cruelty and motivates compassion. Think about animal rights activists or vegetarians, often driven strongly by this foundation.
Okay, care-harm. What's next?
Second is fairness cheating. This likely evolved out of reciprocal altruism. Cooperating pays off, but you need to detect and punish cheaters who take without giving back.
So it's about justice, rights, reciprocity.
Yes, we feel good about fairness, anger about injustice, contempt for cheaters. Now, interestingly, what counts as fair can differ.
How so?
In Western politics, for example, you see a big split. For some, fairness means equality, equal outcomes, distributing resources evenly. For others, fairness means proportionality. People should get rewarded based on their effort or contribution. Same foundation, different interpretation.
Interesting. Okay, third foundation.
Loyalty betrayal. This is about forming cohesive groups, tribes, nations, teams. Loyalty binds us together, makes us willing to sacrifice for the group.
Like patriotism or team spirit.
Absolutely. Think about the famous Robbers Cave experiment, where boys at a summer camp formed incredibly tight groups and became intensely rivalrous almost immediately. Loyalty to the in-group is powerful, and historically, traitors are often despised even more than enemies.
Right. Loyalty betrayal. Number 4.
Authority subversion. This relates to social order, hierarchy, respect for legitimate authority and traditions. Think of Confucianism's emphasis on respecting elders and rulers.
So obeying laws, respecting parents or teachers.
Yes, but it's about legitimate authority. It's not just blind obedience.
Yeah.
While cultures vary, like we might call an ant by her first name in the US, but that will be unthinkable in China, there are still deep intuitions.
Yeah.
Haidt uses the example, would you accept $1 million to slap your father on TV?
Oof. No. Feels deeply wrong.
Right. Even if he consented, it violates a deep sense of respect for that role, that authority. That's the foundation at work.
Okay. 5th.
Sanctity degradation. This one is fascinating. It's rooted in the emotion of disgust. Originally, it probably helped our omnivore ancestors avoid pathogens, poisons, contaminated food.
The yuck factor.
The yuck factor. But it expanded beyond physical contamination to moral contamination. Think about ideas of purity, holiness, avoiding pollution or defilement, feeling disgust at shaking a murderer's hand even if logically clean.
And this applies to things beyond just physical disgust.
Definitely. Haidt argues this foundation is heavily involved in moral debates around things like sexuality, abortion, euthanasia, genetic engineering, issues where people feel something is inherently unnatural, degrading, or violating something sacred, often in ways that aren't about direct harm or fairness.
Right, it's that non-rational feeling of wrongness. Okay, and the last one, number 6.
Liberty oppression. This is about reacting against domination and coercion. Humans have an innate desire for autonomy, to be free from bullies and tyrants.
So, resisting oppression, standing up to bullies.
Exactly. Being sensitive to oppression helps individuals and groups push back against those who try to control or exploit them. It fuels revolutions and movements for freedom. It's that feeling of, don't tread on me.
Okay, so those are the 6. Care harm, fairness cheating, loyalty betrayal, authority subversion, sanctity degradation, and liberty oppression.
Those are the 6 proposed universal foundations, the taste buds of our moral tongue.
And going back to the start eating the dog, the flag, the cannibalism,
Yeah.
they hit different buds, right?
Perfectly. Eating in the dog, even if it's dead and not harmed in the usual sense, strongly triggers the care harm foundation for many. It feels like a violation of that bond, that care.
Okay.
Using the flag as a rag hits authority subversion. It's seen as disrespecting a symbol of the collective, of legitimate national authority.
Makes sense.
And the consensual cannibalism. That powerfully triggers sanctity degradation. It just feels profoundly wrong, polluting, disgusting to many, quite apart from any rational argument about consent or harm.
Wow. So understanding these foundations really helps explain why people can look at the same situation and have such vastly different moral reactions.
Precisely. Political divides, cultural clashes. Haidt argues a lot of it boils down to different groups prioritizing or emphasizing different foundations. Liberals might heavily emphasize care and fairness, while conservatives might give more equal weight to loyalty, authority, and sanctity as well. Neither is necessarily wrong, they just have different moral palettes.
That is a really powerful framework.
Uh,
Okay, so this leads us to the third part. Morality binds us together, but it also blinds us.
Right. There's a dominant view in, say, evolutionary biology and economics that humans are fundamentally selfish, driven by individual survival and gene propagation.
The selfish gene idea.
Exactly. But Haidt argues that's only part of the story. Yes, we're selfish, but we're also intensely groupish. We evolved to cooperate, to form cohesive groups that could outcompete other groups.
So group selection played a role. That's controversial, isn't it?
It is, but Haidt makes a strong case for it, or at least for gene culture coevolution having group-level effects. He points to things like how humans rapidly transition from more individualistic primates to incredibly cooperative societies, how we're unique in our ability to share information and create shared norms and institutions, how culture likely favored more cooperative, gentle individuals within groups, a kind of self-domestication, and even how quickly evolution can work, like that Soviet experiment domesticating foxes in just 30 years.
So we're not just individuals competing.
We're individuals within groups that compete. He uses this great analogy. Humans are maybe 90% chimpanzee and 10% bee.
90% chimp, 10% bee. Explain that.
Well, 90% of the time we're like chimps acting out of self-interest, competing for status and resources within our group. Pretty individualistic. But the other 10%, we have this ability to flip a switch and become like bees in a hive, ultra cooperative, working together for the good of the group, sometimes even sacrificing ourselves for it. This ability to temporarily transcend self-interest and function as a cohesive unit is, Haidt argues, key to human success.
And what flips that switch? How do we go from chimp to bee mode?
Haidt calls them hive switches. These are experiences that make us feel part of something larger than ourselves, dissolving the sense of self momentarily.
Like what?
Think about moments of awe looking at a vast natural landscape, the starry sky, or losing yourself in collective rituals, dancing together at a party, singing in a choir, participating in a religious service, even maybe intense team sports.
Those moments where you feel connected to everyone around you.
Exactly. When those switches are flipped, we feel a powerful sense of belonging, unity, and purpose. It motivates altruism, cooperation, joining groups, volunteering that desire to serve the collective.
That has some really practical implications, doesn't it, for building teams or organizations?
Huge implications. Haidt offers some concrete strategies based on this. First, he says leaders should focus on similarities, not just celebrate diversity.
Why is that? Diversity is usually seen as a strength.
It can be, but Haidt points out that psychologically, similarity breeds connection and trust much more easily. People naturally gravitate to those like them. So, effective leaders find ways to highlight shared values, common goals, shared experiences, things that unite the group.
Okay, focus on common ground. What else?
Second, utilize synchronicity. Get people doing things together, in time.
Like the New Zealand rugby team's haka dance.
That's a perfect example. Synchronized movement, chanting, singing, even just marching together. Studies show it enhances cooperation and bonding within the group. Team exercises, company choirs, shared rituals can all tap into this.
Interesting. And the third strategy?
Promote healthy intergroup competition, but avoid individual competition within the group.
So compete against other companies, but not against each other for bonuses.
Exactly. Our hive psychology gets activated when our group competes against other groups. Think company sports leagues or friendly rivalries between departments. That builds internal cohesion. But pitting team members against each other for limited resources, like a fixed bonus pool, that undermines trust and cooperation. It activates the chimp, not the bee.
Makes a lot of sense. Okay,
Yeah.
so morality binds us using these hive switches, but you also said it blinds us. How?
Well, because our moral judgments are so rooted in these quick, automatic, emotional intuitions, these different taste buds, we often find it genuinely difficult, almost impossible, to understand why someone else disagrees with us on a moral issue.
If they don't share my taste.
Right. If your morality is strongly based on, say, loyalty and sanctity, and someone else's is primarily based on care and liberty, their moral conclusions might seem not just wrong, but irrational, illogical, even willfully perverse to you, and vice versa.
Because we can't feel their foundational intuitions.
Exactly. We can't easily access or empathize with the gut feelings driving their judgment if those feelings don't resonate strongly with our own moral palate. So we dismiss their views as nonsensical or ill-intentioned. This is why moral disagreements can become so polarized and intractable.
So the very thing that binds our group together makes it hard to understand other groups.
That's the paradox. And it gets potentially darker because morality is driven by these foundations, but the content of those foundations can vary. A group can be tightly bound by loyalty, authority, and sanctity.
But in service of a cause that outsiders find abhorrent.
Precisely. Think of highly cohesive but destructive groups throughout history. Their internal morality, their sense of loyalty and purity might be incredibly strong, but it leads them in directions that violate the moral foundations of others, sometimes horrifically. Morality binds, but it doesn't guarantee good outcomes from an external perspective. It's relative in that sense.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot to take in. Let's try and summarize the big takeaways from this deep dive.
Okay, so first, and maybe most importantly, our moral judgments aren't primarily rational calculations. They are driven profoundly by emotion, by our gut feelings. Reason comes later, mostly to justify those feelings.
Right. Absolute rationality isn't really the goal, or even possible, for efficient moral navigation. The emotional elephant leads the writer.
Second, our moral sense isn't monolithic. It operates on these 6 universal taste buds or foundations.
Right.
Care harm, fairness cheating, loyalty betrayal, authority subversion, sanctity degradation, and liberty oppression.
And different people, different cultures, emphasize these tastes differently, which explains a huge amount of our disagreements, especially in politics and social issues.
Exactly. And finally, humans are this incredible mix, 90% self-interested chimpanzee, but with that crucial 10% bee capacity. Morality is the key to flipping the hive switch, binding us into powerful, cooperative groups.
It gives us that deep sense of belonging and shared purpose, making us arguably the most hypersocial and organized species on the planet.
For better and sometimes for worse.
So here's maybe a final thought for you to chew on. If our moral compass really is more about shared feelings, these different taste buds, than about purely objective reasoning, how should that change the way we approach disagreements?
Yeah, and what does it suggest about the kind of society we should aim for, knowing that we have these different moral sensitivities baked into us?
Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.